One single mother accidentally called her boss, asking for help for her baby, and the CEO declared, "Don't worry, I will save my son." A secret of years came to light, revealing a forbidden passion that would change everything. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment where you are watching from. The sweltering heat of February turned Eastside into an urban pressure cooker. At 11:30 p.m., when most Eastside residents had already retreated to their homes with their fans running at full blast, Sarah Johnson pushed the cleaning cart down the silent hallway of the 35th floor of the Skyline Corporate Center. At 28 years old, she bore the weight of being a single mother and the iron determination of someone who does not accept defeat. "Just 3 more rooms and I can go home," she murmured to herself, wiping the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. Her curly hair was tied up in a bun that had lost its shape hours ago. Sarah wore the navy blue uniform of the outsourced cleaning company, slacks and a blouse that had seen better days, but she always kept them spotless. It was a matter of pride. The phone in her pocket vibrated with a message. It was from Mrs. Thompson, who was watching little Ethan. "He's fine, sleeping like an angel. You work too much, dear." Sarah smiled faintly. Ethan was only 6 months old and was her whole world. Those big, curious eyes that watched her every morning before she left for work were her motivation to face multiple jobs. Cleaning the commercial building overnight, working at a diner downtown during the afternoons, and on weekends, residential cleaning in Oakwood. "He will have a better life than mine," she repeated to herself every night, like a mantra. Sarah had grown up in Eastside on the outskirts of the city. She knew well the sound of noisy buses at 5 in the morning, the smell of strong coffee that her grandmother made on the gas stove, and the feeling of wanting more from life than circumstances seemed to allow. While vacuuming the conference room, Sarah gazed through the glass windows at the stunning view of the illuminated city. Down below, the car lights formed golden rivers on the avenues. "Will I ever work in a room like this?" she thought, observing the mahogany table, the Italian leather chairs, and the modern artwork on the wall that probably cost more than her annual salary. The building housed Innovate Tech, one of the largest tech companies in the country, specializing in digital solutions for large corporations. Sarah knew this because she read everything she could find about the company. Magazines left on tables, reports in the trash, anything that could teach her something about the world she wanted to belong to. At 2:15 a.m., when she was finishing cleaning the executive bathroom at the end of the hallway, her phone rang urgently. It was Mrs. Thompson, and her voice was frantic. "Sarah, my dear, you need to come quickly. Ethan has a very high fever and is crying in a strange way. I don't know what else to do." Sarah's world collapsed. Her hands began to tremble as she quickly put away the cleaning supplies. "I'm coming, Mrs. Thompson. Call EMS if it gets worse." Running towards the elevator, Sarah tried to stay calm, but panic took over when she thought of the endless lines at the public healthcare system, the wait to be seen, the possibility of not having money for expensive medications. Ethan was everything to her. The thought of losing him made her feel as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. In the elevator, with trembling hands from nerves and despair, she tried to call the emergency medical number she had written down in an old notebook. But in the confusion and panic, she dialed the wrong number. Instead of the digits for EMS, she called a number she had cleaned off the desk of the company president hours earlier, a business card that had fallen on the floor and that she had put back in place. The phone rang. 3 times before a deep, tired male voice answered, "Hello?" Sarah burst into tears. "Please, I need help. My baby is not well. He has a high fever and I don't know what to do. Please help me." On the other end of the line, there was a silence that lasted only a few seconds, but for Sarah it felt like an eternity. Then the voice responded with an urgency that completely surprised her. "Don't worry. Where are you? I will save my son." Sarah was confused. "Your son? I think I dialed the wrong number. No, you dialed the right one. Which hospital are you taking him to? The response left Sarah bewildered. Who was this man? Why did he refer to Ethan as my son? And more importantly, why did he seem as desperate as she was? I'm taking him to Eastside Community Hospital, she stammered, still trying to process the strange conversation. No, take him to St. Mary's Hospital. I will meet you there. What's your name? Sarah Johnson. But sir, I don't have money for a private hospital. Don't worry about money. Just take our boy there, now. The call ended, leaving Sarah in the elevator, staring at the phone with a mix of confusion, hope, and fear. Who was that mysterious man? How did he know about Ethan? And why was he willing to help a complete stranger in the middle of the night? As she ran through the parking garage towards the bus stop because she didn't have a car, Sarah felt that her life had just taken a completely unexpected turn. She had no idea that she had just called Rafael Mendonça, CEO of Innovate Tech, the 42-year-old man who had built a tech empire but hid a broken heart from the loss of his wife. A son, yet to be born in a car accident 3 years prior, and he could never have imagined that, during the last few months, he had noticed her. That he observed her dedication while she worked, that he paid attention to her respectful conversations in the hallways, and that he had silently fallen in love with that young warrior mother without even knowing her full name. The early morning hours in the city would witness the beginning of a story that would forever change the lives of two people who had no idea how intertwined their paths were destined to be. St. Mary's Hospital buzzed, even in the early hours. Sarah got out of the taxi she had managed to stop on the boulevard, an extravagance that would strain her budget for the week, but Ethan in her arms was inconsolably crying, his skin burning with fever. She had never stepped foot in a private hospital. The marble lobby, the uniformed staff, and the smell of hospital cleanliness mixed with air conditioning intimidated her. "Please, my son has a high fever," she gasped to the receptionist, a blonde woman in her 40s, who looked her up and down, clearly noticing Sarah's wrinkled cleaning uniform and worn-out sneakers. "Ma'am, this is a private facility. Do you have insurance, or will you be paying out of pocket?" The question came with a tone that Sarah knew all too well, the same one she heard when she accidentally walked into shops on Fifth Avenue. There's a man who said he would pay, but I don't know," Sarah stammered, feeling small as Ethan continued to cry. "Child's name?" the receptionist asked, clearly impatient. "Ethan Johnson, but the man who told me to come here didn't give me his name." At that moment, the automatic doors opened, and a tall man rushed in. Sarah recognized the voice immediately. It was the same one from the phone. Rafael Mendonça stood at 6 feet tall, with dark brown hair slightly graying at the temples, deep blue eyes, and wearing a navy blue suit that, even wrinkled from being put on in a hurry, couldn't hide the impeccable cut. His hands were large and well-groomed, his face bore expression lines that spoke of many responsibilities, and at that moment his eyes conveyed a desperate urgency. "Sarah?" He approached quickly. "Where is Ethan?" She stared at him for a few seconds, trying to process that the CEO of the company where she worked was there, in the early hours, referring to her son by name. "How do you know his name? How do you know me?" Raphael looked at Ethan in Sarah's arms, and something in his face changed. His eyes filled with an emotion that Sarah couldn't decipher. Sadness, longing, love. He gently extended his hand to touch the baby's forehead. "He's burning up with fever. Come on, there's no time for explanations now." Raphael turned to the receptionist with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I want you to call Dr. Edward Smith immediately. It's a pediatric emergency. Put everything on my account. Rafael Mendonça. The receptionist's demeanor changed instantly. "Of course, Mr. Mendonça, right away." She began typing quickly on the computer. "Would you like a presidential suite for the family?" "I want the best care available for my family," Rafael replied, glancing sideways at Sarah, who was watching him in disbelief. In 15 minutes, Ethan was being examined by Dr. Edward Smith, a renowned pediatrician whom Rafael had pulled from bed with a phone call. Sarah held her son's hand as he underwent tests, feeling completely out of her element in that private room that was larger than her living room at home. "It's a strong viral infection, but treatable," the doctor explained. "We'll do intravenous hydration and give antipyretics. He needs to be under observation until tomorrow, but there's no reason to panic." Sarah sighed in relief and began to cry, all the accumulated tension finally finding an outlet. Rafael, who had been watching everything standing against the wall, approached and, without asking for permission, placed his hand on her shoulder. "He's going to be okay," he said softly. "You're a very brave mother." Sarah looked at him through her tears. "Who are you? Why are you doing this? And how do you know my son's name?" Rafael pulled up a chair and sat next to the armchair where Sarah was cradling Ethan, who had finally fallen asleep after receiving the medication. The most powerful CEO in the country was there on a Tuesday morning, watching over the sleep of a child who wasn't his. "My name is Rafael Mendonça," he began, running his hands through his hair in a display of nervousness that contrasted with his usual confidence. I'm the president of Innovate Tech." "I know who you are," Sarah whispered. "Your face is in all the elevators at the company, but that doesn't explain—" "For 6 months I've been watching you," Rafael confessed, looking at his own hands. "Not on purpose at first, but I tend to stay at the office late, and I always saw you working. Your dedication, your professionalism, the caring way you treated even the cleaning work, caught my attention." Sarah felt her face heat up. "You were watching me work? I started to notice little things, how you always left a flower from the planter on my desk every Friday, how you organized the papers in a way that made my work easier on Monday, how you never touched anything personal, but always left everything spotless." Rafael paused. "And then, 3 months ago, I saw you in the elevator with him." Rafael looked at Ethan sleeping. "You were coming back from lunch. Probably had gone to pick him up from daycare because the nanny had cancelled. He cried in the elevator and you started singing a song. 'Twinkle, twinkle, little star.' And he stopped crying and smiled at you." Sarah remembered that day. It had been a rush because Mrs. Thompson had to take her own granddaughter to the doctor. "That's when I knew," Rafael continued, his voice lowering. "I knew I had fallen in love with both of you." The silence was only interrupted by the soft beeps of the medical monitors. Sarah was trying to process what she was hearing. The richest man she knew personally had just confessed that he was in love with her, a cleaner from the East Side. "This is crazy," she murmured. "You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I know that you take 3 buses to get to work and always arrive 15 minutes early. I know that you study at night. I saw the business books in your bag. I know that you love your son more than anything in the world, and that you work multiple jobs to give him a better life." Rafael looked directly at her. "I know that you are the strongest and most determined woman I've ever met." Sarah felt tears in her eyes again. But this time for a different reason. No one had ever spoken about her that way, not even Ethan's father, who had disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. "And I know one more thing," Rafael added, gently touching Ethan's hand. "I know that this boy made me feel something I thought I would never feel again in my life." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, although something inside her already suspected the answer. Raphael took a deep breath before responding, as if he were about to reveal the deepest secret of his soul. 3 years ago, I lost my wife and my unborn child in a car accident. Since then, I thought I would never be able to love or be a father again. But when I saw Ethan and you, I felt like God was giving me a second chance. The early morning light of the city continued outside, but inside that hospital room, 2 completely different worlds had begun to meet in a way neither of them imagined possible. Dawn crept slowly through the hospital room window, painting the city in golden hues that contrasted with the typical morning fog. Ethan had slept peacefully through the night, his temperature finally stabilizing. Sarah hadn't slept a wink, torn between worry for her son and the unsettling presence of Raphael, who had insisted on staying there all night. "You didn't have to stay," Sarah said for the 10th time, watching Raphael uncomfortably doze in the chair beside her. Even in sleep, he maintained an upright posture that betrayed years of corporate responsibility. "I couldn't sleep at home knowing you were here," he replied, opening his eyes. There was a sincerity in his voice that Sarah didn't know how to interpret. Dr. Edwards entered the room at 8 a.m., accompanied by a nurse who brought the morning coffee, a service Sarah discovered was standard in private rooms, but to her seemed like an absurd luxury. "The fever has completely broken. Ethan is ready to go home," the doctor announced, examining the baby who was playing with his own feet. "But I would like to see him again in a week, just for a follow-up." When they were alone again, Sarah felt the weight of reality returning. The hospital bill would be astronomical, and she would have to figure out a way to pay Raphael back, even if it took years. "How much was the bill?" she asked, holding Ethan in her lap. "That's not important right now," Raphael replied, putting on the jacket he had taken off during the night. "It is important. I won't accept charity." Sarah's voice came out firmer than she expected. "My grandmother taught me that everything in life must be earned with dignity." Raphael stopped adjusting his tie and looked at her with an expression that mixed admiration and something she couldn't identify. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." She was. She raised 5 children working as a housekeeper for a wealthy family. In the Upper West Side, she always told me that rich people aren't better than poor people, they just have more money, and that we should never forget where we came from. An awkward silence settled between them. Sarah realized that she had, involuntarily, created a barrier between their worlds, reminding both of them of the social distance that separated them. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I didn't mean to be rude. It wasn't rudeness. It was honesty. And your grandmother was right." Raphael sat on the edge of the hospital bed. "Sarah, can I tell you something about my family?" She nodded, curious despite herself. "My father built Innovate Tech from scratch. He was the son of Italian immigrants who came to America with nothing. He worked as a clerk in an electronics store until he saved enough money to start his own business." Raphael looked out the window as he spoke. "He always told me that money is a tool, not an identity, that a person's worth is measured by what they do with the opportunities they have." "And what did you do with your opportunities?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "Until I met you, I think I wasted many of them." Raphael looked directly at her. "I lived in a bubble, Sarah, surrounded by people who agree with me because I'm rich, who do business with me because they have an interest. I haven't met someone real in a long time." Ethan began to whimper, and Sarah automatically started to rock him gently, softly humming a song her mother used to sing to her. Raphael watched the scene with an expression of pure tenderness. "Can I hold him?" he asked hesitantly. Sarah was surprised by the question, but something in Raphael's expression touched her. She extended Ethan to him, watching as his large, careful hands held the baby with extreme delicacy. "Hey there, champ," Raphael murmured to Ethan, who was looking at him with curiosity. "You gave your mum quite a scare yesterday, didn't you?" Seeing Raphael with her son in his arms, Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced since Ethan was born. It was as if a missing piece had finally fallen into place. "Raphael," she said softly, "why are you really doing this? And don't give me some story about love at first sight. That only happens in soap operas." Raphael Sarah Johnson laughed, the first genuine laugh Ryan had heard from her. "You don't believe in love at first sight?" "I believe in attraction at first sight. I believe in curiosity at first sight. But love takes time, knowledge, trust." "You're right," Ryan admitted, still cradling Ethan. "It wasn't at first sight. It was gradual, watching you work, seeing your determination, your dignity. And when I saw you with him," he paused, "it was like my heart woke up from a very long sleep." Sarah felt her face heat up again. "And now? What happens now?" "Now I would like to ask for a chance to get to know you better, for you to get to know me too. No rush, no pressure." Ryan handed Ethan back to Sarah. "And I would like to start by paying for your business studies." "I already told you that." "It's not charity," Ryan interrupted her. "It's an investment. The company needs smart, determined people. You would finish your degree, do a paid internship in the administrative department, and if you proved your worth, and I know you will, you would be hired." Sarah stared at him, searching for signs of condescension or pity. She found only sincerity. "And what about this between us?" she asked, gesturing vaguely between them. "This between us would happen regardless of the job. If it happens—" Ryan stood up. "Sarah, I don't want to buy your affection. I want to earn it. There's a difference." At that moment, Ryan's phone rang. He answered with a formal "hello" that contrasted sharply with the affectionate tone he had used to speak to her. "Yes, Mom. I know what time it is. I was at the hospital." "No, I'm not sick. It's complicated." He looked at Sarah with an apologetic expression. "No, I can't explain right now. We'll talk later." When he hung up, Sarah realized that reality was knocking at the door. Ryan was not just a man who had taken an interest in her. He was one of the most influential businessmen in the country, with family, social obligations, expectations. "Your family won't approve," Sarah said, not as a question, but as a statement. "My family will have to understand that I'm an adult, capable of making my own choices." The response came quickly, but Sarah noticed a slight hesitation. "Ryan, I need to be honest with you." Sarah took a deep breath. "I don't know if I'm ready to step into your world, and I don't know if you're ready to step into mine." "Then let's find out together," he replied, gently touching Ethan's face. "One step at a time." As they prepared to leave the hospital, Sarah had no idea that at that very moment, the HR director of Innovate Tech, Patricia Anderson, was in her office reviewing the security camera footage from the building, trying to understand why her boss had rushed out of the company the night before. And she had no idea that Ryan's mother, Elizabeth Morgan, had already hired a private investigator to find out who the mysterious woman was that had taken her son out of the house in the middle of the night. The war was just beginning. The following Monday brought with it the harsh reality of the differences between Sarah and Ryan's worlds. She was back at work, pushing her cleaning cart through the halls of Innovate Tech, but now everything had changed. Every glance from the employees seemed different. Every whisper in the hall sounded like a threat. Patricia Anderson observed Sarah from her 10-centimeter heels, her perfectly styled blonde hair, and impeccable Chanel suit brutally contrasting with Sarah's simple uniform. At 38, Patricia had built her career by being relentless and strategic, and for the past 2 years she had harbored a secret crush on Ryan, a crush she had carefully nurtured, waiting for the right moment to reveal herself. Sarah Johnson, Patricia said, suddenly appearing in the corridor where Sarah was organizing her cleaning supplies. "I need to talk to you." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "Yes, ma'am." "In my office, now." Patricia's office on the 30th floor was intimidating. Modern furniture, diplomas on the walls, and a panoramic view of the Hudson River. Sarah had cleaned that room dozens of times, but she had never sat in the leather chair that faced the executive desk. "Sit down," Patricia ordered, closing the door and drawing the blinds to ensure privacy. "Let's talk about your special situation." "My situation?" Sarah tried to keep her voice steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Patricia turned on her laptop and turned the screen towards Sarah. On the screen, images from the security cameras showed Ryan running through the halls in the early hours of Thursday morning, clearly desperate. At 2:18 a.m., our CEO rushed out of the company. 3 hours later, a contracted employee was seen getting into a taxi with him near St. Mary's Hospital. Patricia spoke with the precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence. "Care to explain what happened?" Sarah felt her blood run cold. "My son was sick. Mr. Morgan helped me." "Helped you?" Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in her voice. "Sarah, do you understand the gravity of this situation? A CEO of a publicly traded company involved with a contracted employee. This could lead to scandal, lawsuits, investigations." "Nothing inappropriate happened," Sarah replied, raising her chin with the dignity her grandmother had taught her. "Not yet." Patricia stood up and walked to the window. "But I have known Ryan for 10 years. He has been vulnerable since his wife's death. A rich, lonely man can make impulsive decisions." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. "Are you insinuating that I'm taking advantage of him?" "I'm suggesting that you're in a position that could be very dangerous for everyone involved." Patricia turned, her cold eyes fixed on Sarah. "Especially for you." At that moment, the door opened without ceremony. Ryan entered, and his expression changed instantly when he saw Sarah in the room. "Patricia, what's going on here?" "Ryan, I'm glad you arrived." Patricia immediately adopted a professional tone. "I was clarifying some issues with employee Sarah about the company's security protocols." Ryan Ethan looked from Sarah to Patricia, clearly sensing the tension in the air. "What kind of questions?" "Nothing important." Sarah quickly stood up. "I was just leaving anyway." "Sarah, wait," Ethan said, but she had already left the room, leaving a tense atmosphere between him and Patricia. "Ethan, we need to talk." Patricia closed the door again. "About you and that girl." "There's nothing to talk about." "There is. People are talking. Your sudden departures, your different behavior in the past few weeks." Patricia stepped closer to him. "Ethan, I care about you. Ever since you lost Emily, you haven't been the same. And now this obsession with a cleaning lady." "Be careful, Patricia." Ethan's voice came out dangerously low. "Be very careful with your words. I've been your friend for years. I can speak frankly." Patricia touched his arm. "You're confusing gratitude with love, loneliness with passion. That woman is an opportunist who saw a chance to change her life." Ethan jerked his arm away. "You don't know Sarah. I know women like her. They were born with nothing and will do anything to get something." Patricia crossed her arms. "She has a child, Ethan. Have you thought that it might not even be the father she claims?" "Enough." Ethan walked towards the door. "This conversation is over." "Ethan, wait!" Patricia ran after him. "Your mother called me yesterday. She's worried. She heard you disappeared in the early morning and—" Ethan paused with his hand on the doorknob. "My mother called you. She's organizing a dinner party next Friday. The Smiths will be there. Do you remember Jessica Smith? Harvard graduate, traditional family." "I'm not going." Ethan opened the door. "Ethan, be reasonable. At least show up to prove you're okay. Your family cares." On the other side of the door, Sarah was leaning against the hallway wall, having heard every word of the conversation. Her worst suspicions were being confirmed. She didn't belong in that world, and everyone around Ethan would make sure to remind her of that. When Ethan left the room and saw her there, he immediately knew she had heard everything. "Sarah, no." She raised her hand to stop him. "You don't need to explain anything. I understand." "No, you don't understand." Ethan stepped closer, but Sarah took a step back. "I do understand. Your family, your friends, your employees, they all think I'm an opportunist after your money, and maybe they're right." "How can you say that?" Sarah took a deep breath, trying to find the courage to say what needed to be said. "Because last night, looking at my child sleeping in the crib I bought in 10 installments, I asked myself what I really want from you." The hallway was empty, but they both spoke, in whispers, aware that any word could become fuel for gossip. "And what was your answer?" "That I want my child to have all the opportunities I didn't have. That I want to study, grow professionally, give him a decent life." Sarah looked directly into Ethan's eyes. "And if being with you can guarantee that, then maybe they're right about me." Ethan felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Sarah, you can't be serious." "I'm being honest for the first time." Tears began to form in her eyes. "Because the truth is, I'm falling for you, and that terrifies me, because I know that in the end you'll choose your world, your family, your social position. And I'll just be another story you'll fondly tell but prefer to forget." Ethan tried to step closer again, but Sarah shook her head. "I need to think. We both need to think." She grabbed her cleaning cart. Calmly, away from each other. As Sarah walked down the hallway, Ethan stood frozen, feeling the world collapse around him. He didn't know that at that very moment, his mother Beatrice was receiving the first report from the private investigator in her mansion on the Upper East Side, and he also didn't know that Sarah Johnson was hiding a secret about Gabriel's father that could completely change the course of this story. The social chess game had begun, and all the pieces were moving. The Morgan Mansion on the Upper East Side was a symbol of power and tradition. Built in the 1940s, the neoclassical house occupied a plot of 2,000 square meters, with gardens designed by Burle Marx and interiors that mixed European antiques with contemporary Brazilian art. It was there that Beatrice Morgan, at 68 years old, reigned as matriarch of one of the most influential families in New York. Sitting in her living room, decorated with 18th-century French furniture and modern art, Beatrice meticulously examined the photographs that the private investigator had left on the mahogany table. Her hands, adorned with discreet yet valuable jewelry, trembled slightly, not from age but from contained indignation. "So this is the girl who has turned my son's head," she murmured to herself, looking at a photo of Sarah leaving the hospital with Gabriel in her arms, alongside Ethan. Charles Morgan, her late husband, had built Innovate Tech with blood, sweat, and strategic vision. He always said that the company should remain in the family's hands, and that Ethan should marry someone who could contribute to the business's expansion. The premature death of Emily had been a tragedy, but also an opportunity for Ethan to start over with someone suitable for his social position. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Jessica Smith, daughter of one of the largest soybean producers in the country, and the perfect candidate to be Ethan's new wife. "Aunt Beatrice," Jessica said. She had called Ethan's mother that since childhood. "My mother told me about the dinner party on Friday. Did Ethan confirm?" "Not yet, dear, but he will be there," Beatrice replied, with the conviction of someone used to making things happen her way. Meanwhile, in the Marina was arriving home after an exhausting day at Innovate Tech. The two-room apartment she shared with Ethan was on the 5th floor of a walk-up building in the East Side housing complex. The walls were thin, and she could hear the neighbors' television, the couple fighting upstairs, and the music playing in the courtyard. "How was today, my daughter?" asked Mrs. Thompson, who was feeding Gabriel in the small kitchen. "Complicated." Marina flopped onto the second-hand love seat she had bought. "I think I made a really big mistake." Mrs. Thompson, a 62-year-old woman who had raised 4 children on her own, had that wisdom that comes from life experience. Her grey hair was always tied up in a bun, and her brown eyes had the ability to see through people. What kind of mistake? Marina told her everything. The hospital, Ethan, the conversation with Patricia, the doubts that consumed her. Mrs. Thompson listened in silence, rocking Gabriel in her arms. "And do you like him?" she asked. When Marina finished, "I do," Marina admitted, hiding her face in her hands. "And that scares me." "Why?" "Because when I'm with him, I forget where I come from. I forget that I'm a cleaning lady from the outskirts. I start dreaming of things that aren't meant for me." Mrs. Thompson placed Gabriel in the crib and sat next to Marina. "Girl, do you think love has a zip code?" "It's not just love, Mrs. Thompson. It's everything that comes with it. His family, his world, the expectations. I saw how that woman looked at me, as if I were some creature that appeared in her office. And are you going to let the prejudice of a stranger define your happiness?" Before Marina could respond, her phone rang. It was a message from an unknown number. "Marina, this is Patricia. I need to talk to you urgently. I found out some things about Ethan that you need to know. Can we meet tomorrow?" Marina showed the message to Mrs. Thompson, who frowned. "That woman isn't trying to help you, Marina. She's trying to push you away from him." "How do you know?" "Because I was a domestic worker in the homes of wealthy people for 40 years. I know this type of woman well." On the other side of the city, Ethan was in his apartment in Oakwood, a 4,300-square-foot penthouse overlooking Central Park. Despite the luxury around him, Italian designer furniture, artwork, a climate-controlled wine cellar with rare wines, he felt lonelier than ever. Sitting in his home office, he tried to focus on the quarterly reports, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking since the conversation with Marina. The pain in his chest was physical, as if something essential had been ripped from him. His phone rang. It was his personal assistant. "Mr. Ethan, your mother has called 3 times. She insists that you return the call." "Thank you, Carla. Can you reschedule my appointments for tomorrow morning? I have something important to take care of." Ethan knew exactly what he needed to do. He needed to talk to Marina, away from the curious eyes of the office, away from Patricia's influence and his mother's expectations. He needed to show her who he really was, not just the CEO of Innovate Tech. The next morning, Ethan arrived at Marina's building at 6 a.m. He knew she left early to drop Gabriel off at daycare before heading to work at the diner downtown. When she came down the stairs carrying Gabriel and a large bag with diapers and bottles, she almost stumbled when she saw him there. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" He had swapped his suit for jeans and a polo shirt. He looked younger, more human, but still completely out of place in the surroundings. "I came to ask you for a chance to talk. For real." Marina looked around, aware that the neighbors were already peeking through their windows. An imported car in the parking lot of the housing complex was definitely an event. "Ethan, you can't just show up here like this. People will talk. Then let's go somewhere else." He stepped closer. "Let me take you to daycare?" Marina hesitated, but Gabriel started clapping his little hands when he saw Ethan, as if he recognized him. This reaction from her son left her even more confused. During the car ride to the neighborhood daycare, they spoke little. Ethan observed everything: The pothole-filled streets, the simple houses, the morning hustle of people heading to work on crowded buses. It was a world he only knew from glimpses through the tinted windows of cars. "This is it," Marina pointed to a simple but well-kept building with a small playground in front. Ethan parked and, to Marina's surprise, got out of the car to accompany her to the entrance of the daycare. The other mothers stopped talking and looked at him curiously. A clearly wealthy man dropping off a child at a public daycare was definitely a sight. "Hi, Marina," said Sarah, one of the caregivers. "How is Gabriel? We heard he was sick." "He's doing much better," Marina replied, handing Gabriel over to the caregiver. "This is Ethan, a friend." Ethan greeted Sarah politely, and Marina noticed how he looked around, absorbing every detail. The children's drawings on the walls, the simple but well-organized toys, the care with which the caregivers treated the children. When they returned to the car, Ethan sat in silence for a few minutes before speaking. "Marina, I need to tell you something. Yesterday, after our conversation, I realized that you were right to be scared." She looked at him surprised. "Not in the way you think. You're afraid of not being accepted in my world. But I'm afraid of something worse, discovering that my world doesn't deserve you." Marina's phone vibrated. It was another message from Patricia. "Marina, it's about the death of Ethan's wife. There are things he hasn't told you, things that could be dangerous for you and your son." Marina felt a chill ran down her spine. What secrets did Ethan still hide? And was Patricia right about the dangers of getting involved with him? The truth was about to come to light, and it would change everything Sarah thought she knew about the man she was falling for. The morning latte at the corner bakery, a simple bakery in the heart of New York, contrasted sharply with the five-star restaurants Ethan usually frequented. Sitting at a worn formica table, he watched Sarah enjoy her latte and toasted bread, luxuries she only allowed herself when she had some extra cash. "Aren't you going to eat anything?" Sarah asked, noticing that Ethan was just stirring his coffee without sugar. "I'm not very hungry," he replied, clearly nervous. "Sarah, about that message you received from Patricia." Sarah nearly choked on her coffee. "How do you know about the message?" "Because I've known Patricia for years, and when she wants something, she goes to great lengths to get it." Ethan sighed deeply. "She's probably going to tell you about Emily's death." "Your wife?" "Ex-wife," Ethan corrected, and Sarah noticed the pain that crossed his face. "We were separating when she died." Sarah set her cup down, feeling she was about to discover something important. "Emily and I married very young. I was 25, she was 23. It was an arranged marriage by our families, quite common in our social circle. She was the daughter of a businessman in finance, graduated from Harvard, spoke 4 languages. Ethan spoke as if reciting a resume. On paper, we were the perfect couple. But an arranged marriage is not synonymous with love. For 15 years, we lived as good friends, sharing the same house. She had her social circles, I had mine. She collected art, I built the company, it worked." Sarah noticed Ethan's hands trembling slightly as he spoke. 4 years ago, she got pregnant. That's when I realized I wanted more from life than that automatic existence. I wanted to be a real father, to have a real family. I started pushing for our relationship, to become more real. And she? She didn't want that. She said our marriage was perfect as it was. No emotional complications, no romantic expectations. When I said I wanted a divorce, she panicked. Not out of love, but because she didn't want to lose her social status. Ethan paused to breathe, and Sarah realized this was a story he had probably never told anyone. "On the night of the accident, we had a huge fight. I had spoken to my lawyer about the divorce, and she found out. She was furious, saying I was ruining her life, the baby's life, our family's reputations." "What happened?" She stormed out of the house, driving her own car. It was pouring rain. She was speeding. Ethan closed his eyes. She lost control on the highway and crashed into a concrete pillar. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. Ethan, for 3 years everyone blamed me. My family, friends, the press. Everyone thought I was a monster for wanting to leave a pregnant woman. I never told the truth about our marriage. I let them think the worst of me. Why? Because it was easier to carry the guilt than to admit I wasted 15 years of my life in a fake marriage, and because, Ethan looked her straight in the eye, until I met you, I thought I didn't deserve forgiveness. Sarah reached across the table and touched his hand. Ethan, it wasn't your fault. Rationally, I know that, but emotionally, he held her hand. Sarah, that's why when I saw you with Gabriel, when I saw how you love him unconditionally, I thought God was giving me a second chance to do things right. Sarah's phone vibrated again. Another message from Patricia. Have you talked to him? Did he tell you that Emily found out he was having an affair? That's why she left that night? Meet me today at 6 p.m. at Hudson Mall. I need to show you the evidence. Sarah showed the message to Ethan, whose face went pale. She's lying, he said immediately. Sarah, I never cheated on Emily. There may not have been love between us, but there was always respect. Then why is she saying this? Ethan sighed, running his hands through his hair. Because Patricia was in love with me at the time. She worked as my personal assistant and misinterpreted some situations. What situations? Meetings that ran late, business trips where she accompanied me, work dinners. Ethan shook his head. She created a fantasy in her mind, and when Emily died, she thought it was her chance. Sarah felt a mix of jealousy and concern. And you never. Patricia is competent professionally, but I always knew her feelings were unrequited. Ethan held both of Sarah's hands. Sarah, you need to believe me. You are the first woman I've truly fallen in love with. Sarah wanted to believe, but the doubts planted by Patricia were growing like weeds in her mind. She had learned in life that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. Ethan, I'm going to meet her today. Sarah, no. She will manipulate everything you say, use it against us. Then come with me. If you have nothing to hide, face her head on. Ethan hesitated, and Sarah noticed the hesitation. Is there something else you haven't told me? It's not about Emily, he said slowly. It's about my family. My mother hired a private investigator to find out everything about you. Sarah felt as if she had been slapped. What? She wants to protect the family, the company? She's paranoid about anything that could affect our reputation. And what did this investigator find out? Sarah asked, feeling panic rise. I don't know yet. But Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Sarah nodded, though her heart was racing. But Ethan, I don't want to go to your apartment or mine. Can we meet somewhere neutral? I know a place. I'll send you the location. 40 minutes later, Marina found herself in a surreal situation, sitting at a reserved table in the Sky Lounge, the rotating restaurant at the top of one of the most famous buildings in downtown New York. The 360-degree view of the illuminated city was stunning, but she could barely appreciate the scenery. Ethan had arrived first and was waiting for her with 2 glasses of expensive wine, a bottle that probably cost more than Marina's monthly salary. I don't drink alcohol, she said, taking a seat in the chair he pulled out for her. Why not? Ethan sat down, genuinely curious. Because I need to stay alert to take care of Gabriel, and because my father drank a lot when I was a child. Marina was straightforward, without beating around the bush. If we're going to have this conversation about truths and secrets, I'll start by being completely honest with you. Ethan signaled for the waiter to swap the wine for sparkling water and leaned forward. Then let's talk. Antonio is coming back to the US. Marina shot out without preamble. He found out about Gabriel and wants to meet his son. Ethan fell silent for a few seconds, processing the information. How did he find out? Patricia. She sent him pictures of Gabriel through social media. Damn. Ethan clenched his fists. Marina, I'm so sorry. She had no right. She did, because I lied to you about Antonio. Marina took a deep breath. He didn't disappear when he found out about the pregnancy. He never knew I was pregnant. Ethan stared at her, and Marina saw disappointment forming in his eyes. When I found out I was pregnant, Antonio had already gone back to Portugal. We had broken up because he wanted me to go with him, and I didn't want to leave everything behind here. When I learned about the pregnancy, he was already dating someone else there. I decided not to say anything. Why? Because I didn't want him to come back out of obligation, because I didn't want to share my child, because... Marina fought back tears. Because I was afraid I wouldn't be enough for Gabriel if he had another reference. Ethan reached out his hand across the table, but this time Marina didn't take it. Ethan, I need to tell you one more thing, and after this you'll understand why it might be better for us to stop here. Marina, let me finish. She looked out the window, seeing the city lights. I didn't reach out, to you by chance. 3 months ago, when I saw you watching my work, I started researching you. I read everything I could find online, asked other employees, found out about Emily, about your loneliness. Ethan went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe unconsciously I started to nurture a fantasy about you before we even really knew each other. And when Gabriel got sick and I accidentally called you... Marina finally met his gaze. Part of me wonders if it wasn't really an accident. The silence that followed was broken only by the sounds of conversations at other tables and the soft sound of the piano playing in the background of the restaurant. Are you saying all of this was calculated? Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying I don't know where coincidence ends and manipulation begins. Mine, yours, everyone around us. Marina stood up. And until I figure that out, I can't continue with this story. This time it was Ethan who was left alone at the table, watching Marina walk away as his life crumbled for the second time. Down below, New York continued to pulse, indifferent to the personal dramas unfolding. In its glass and concrete towers, 3 days passed in absolute silence between Marina and Ethan. She had returned to her usual routine, cleaning at Innovate Tech during the night, working at a diner in the afternoon, taking care of Gabriel in her spare time. But now she carried an extra weight in her chest. The words she had spoken at the Sky Lounge echoed in her mind like a confession she wasn't sure she wanted to have made. Ethan, for his part, had locked himself in endless meetings and quick business trips to avoid any possibility of a casual encounter in the company hallways. Patricia watched everything with barely concealed satisfaction, savoring what she considered her personal victory. On Friday morning, while Marina was cleaning the executive bathroom on the 35th floor, her phone rang. It was a number with an international code. Marina, it's me, Antonio. The voice that had marked an important period of her life now sounded strange, laden with a more pronounced Portuguese accent and a formality that hadn't existed before. Hi, Antonio. Listen, I landed in New York last night. Can we meet today? I want to meet our son. Marina closed. Her eyes, trying to prepare for a conversation she had mentally rehearsed hundreds of times, but never felt truly ready for. Antonio, first of all, I need to make one thing clear. Gabriel is my son. I raised him alone, made all the decisions about him, and that won't change just because you're back. Marina, I didn't know. If I had known, if you had known what? Would you have left your girlfriend in Portugal? Would you have come back to the US, or would you have just sent a check? Marina's voice was harsher than she intended. I would have done the right thing, Antonio replied, and there was genuine hurt in his voice. You know that. Marina sighed. Antonio had always been a good man, hard-working, honest, caring. The problem had never been his character, but rather the lack of ambition that frustrated her. While she dreamed of growing, studying, giving a better life to the children she might have, he was content with his job as a waiter and his simple plans to return to Portugal someday. Where do you want us to meet? Marina asked, resigned. How about Central Park? Somewhere open, no pressure. Can bring some things to... How long? Ethan asked. I don't know, but in the meantime, I would like you two to talk. As adults, about what is best for a child who ended up with two fathers. The suggestion left both uncomfortable, but Sarah knew it was necessary. Gabriel deserved the adults in his life to act maturely, regardless of their own conflicts. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Elizabeth Morgan was receiving the full report from the investigator about her past. A report that would reveal secrets neither Sarah nor Antonio imagined existed. The plot was thickening, and the upcoming decisions would forever change the fate of everyone involved. The Morgan mansion was enveloped in a tense atmosphere on that Sunday morning. Elizabeth had called an urgent family meeting, and now she watched her son Ethan, her sister-in-law Sylvia, Carlos's younger sister, and the family lawyer, Dr. Edwards, seated in the main living room. Ethan, Elizabeth began, her voice carrying an authority shaped by decades of leading one of the most influential families in New York. I have received the complete report on Sarah Johnson. Ethan tensed in the leather armchair. Mom, we've already talked about this. My personal life is not family business. It becomes family business when it can affect the company and our reputation. Elizabeth opened a thick folder on the coffee table, and what we discovered is surprising. Dr. Edwards, a 65-year-old man who had been the family lawyer for over 3 decades, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ethan, it might be best if you listen to what we have to say before jumping to conclusions. Sylvia, an elegant 50-year-old woman who had always been the family's mediator, touched her nephew's arm. Rafa, this could change everything. Fine. Ethan crossed his arms, clearly irritated. Just get on with it. Elizabeth pulled out a yellowed birth certificate from the folder. This is Sarah Johnson's birth certificate, born on March 15, 1995, at St. Mary's Hospital. And so, I know when she was born. But do you know who her father is? Elizabeth turned the document for Ethan to see. Paul Johnson, better known as Paul the Cleaner. Ethan furrowed his brow. That name doesn't ring a bell. Dr. Edwards leaned forward. Paul Johnson worked at Innovate Tech for 15 years, from 1995 to 2010. He was the night cleaning supervisor. He was fired. For cause in 2010, Elizabeth continued, accused of stealing equipment. Ethan stood up abruptly. Are you insinuating that Sarah... Calm down, son. Sylvia interrupted him. Let your mother finish. Elizabeth pulled out more documents from the folder. Paul Johnson died in 2012, 2 years after his dismissal from complications of alcoholism. But before he died, he wrote a letter to his brother Carlos, your father, confessing that he had been wrongfully accused. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan looked at the 3 adults in front of him, trying to process the information. Are you saying that Sarah is the daughter of a man who was wrongfully fired from our company, a man who died in poverty, believing that his own boss had betrayed his trust? Dr. Edwards handed the letter to Ethan. Read it for yourself. Ethan took the paper with trembling hands. The letter, written in simple and uneven handwriting, was yellowed with age. Carlos, my boss and friend, I know I will die soon. My liver can't take the drink anymore, and the drink won't let me forget the shame. That's why I need to speak the truth before I go. I didn't steal those computers. It was Marcos from the warehouse, but he was the manager's protégé. When I was accused, I tried to defend myself, but no one wanted to listen. I lost my job, my dignity, and because of the drink that followed, I lost my family too. My daughter Sarah always asks why I drink so much. I never knew how to explain that it's because a man can't bear to be treated like a thief when he has always been honest. She is a smart girl, a scholar, and deserves more than I could give, if she ever seeks work. At Innovate Tech, I ask that you be fair with her. She is not to blame for my failures. I'm sorry for everything, Paul Johnson. Ethan finished reading the letter with tears in his eyes. His mind raced, connecting dots he had never noticed before. Why didn't my father ever show me this letter? Because it arrived a month after his death, Dr. Edwards replied. I found it among the personal papers that were kept in the office. And do you think Sarah knows about this? Elizabeth shook her head. If she knew, do you think she would come to work at the company that ruined her father's life? Ethan sat down again, feeling as if he had been punched in the stomach. So when she said she might have manipulated the situation, she may be being sincere without knowing the full truth, Sylvia said gently, or she could be hiding something much deeper. Elizabeth stood up and walked to the window overlooking the garden. Ethan, there's something more. The investigator discovered that Sarah applied to work at Innovate Tech 5 times over the last 3 years. Each time she was rejected, presumably because of her father's history in the system. But on the 5th attempt, Dr. Edwards continued, she managed to get through the contracted company, and curiously, she was specifically placed on the night shift of your floor. Ethan felt a mix of anger and confusion. Are you insinuating that she planned everything from the start? We are saying that there are too many coincidences to be coincidences, Elizabeth replied. A young woman with her background, working exactly where she could find you, having a child the right age to awaken your paternal instincts. Enough! Ethan stood up again, this time violently. You are deconstructing everything based on suspicions and paranoia. Ethan, Sylvia tried to calm him, we care about you. Ever since you lost Emily and the baby, you haven't been the same. It's natural that I fall in love. Is this what you think of me? That I'm so pathetic that any manipulator can fool me? Ethan looked at the three with indignation. Dr. Edwards cleared his throat again. Ethan, there's one more thing. About Anthony Parker. What about him? He came to the US with money. A lot of money. His restaurant in Portugal is indeed prosperous, but he also recently received a significant sum from an anonymous source. Ethan felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Are you insinuating that someone paid for him to come back? Elizabeth turned to face her son. We're saying that there are forces working to separate you two, and we need to find out who and why. At that moment, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Something about my father and Innovate Tech. Ethan showed the message to the 3 adults, who exchanged meaningful glances. It seems our Sarah has decided to reveal her cards, Elizabeth murmured. Or someone revealed them to her, Dr. Edwards added. Ethan looked at the letter from Paul Johnson that he still held in his hands, then back at Sarah's message on his phone. His life had become a complex web of secrets, lies, and half-truths, and he no longer knew whom to trust. I'm going to meet her, he finally said. Ethan, be cautious, Elizabeth warned. If she really knows about her father, this conversation could be a trap. Or it could be our only chance to finally uncover the truth, Ethan replied, tucking the letter into his pocket. As he left the mansion, Ethan had no idea that Sarah had discovered the letter in a completely unexpected way. Anthony had received an anonymous copy at the hotel where he was staying, along with instructions to show it to her. The game of manipulations was coming to an end, but the last cards had yet to be played on the table, and when they were, they would discover that there was a secret player controlling all the pieces from the beginning. Villa-Lobos Park was almost empty on that Sunday afternoon. Sarah had chosen that location because she needed open space, fresh air, and the feeling that she could run away if things got too difficult. She arrived 15 minutes early, pushing Gabriel's stroller and carrying a document folder that Anthony had handed her that morning. Ethan arrived promptly at 4 p.m., wearing jeans and a light blue button-up shirt. Even in casual clothes, he exuded a natural authority that contrasted with the relaxed atmosphere of the park. Sarah noticed that he was also carrying papers, a leather folder she recognized as belonging to the office. "Sarah," he said as he approached, his voice cautious. "Ethan." She pointed to a bench, under a tree. "Can we sit?" They settled down with Gabriel between them, the baby happily playing with a rattle, oblivious to the tension in the air. For a few moments neither spoke, both mentally organizing the words they needed to say. "You first or I first?" Sarah finally asked. "You called me. You first." Sarah took a deep breath and pulled out a death certificate from the folder. "My father died 13 years ago. Paul Johnson. He worked at your company for 15 years and was fired for cause in 2010. Ethan showed no surprise, and Sarah noticed. "You already knew." "My family found out this morning." Ethan took the letter from his pocket. "And they found this." Sarah took the paper with trembling hands. As she read the words written by her father, tears began to fall. It was the first time she had seen Paul's handwriting since his death, and the words carried all the pain and humiliation he had felt in the last years of his life. "He was innocent," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "I know, and I'm so sorry. For the injustice, for the pain we caused your family." Sarah looked at Ethan with a mix of anger and sadness. "For years I wondered why my father drank so much, why a hard-working and honest man had turned into a bitter and defeated person. Now I know." "Sarah, no." She raised her hand. "Let me finish. When I started working at Innovate Tech, I didn't know any of this. The contracted company didn't tell me that my father had worked there. I only found out a few weeks later when I saw a photo of him in the company's internal newsletter, an article about former employees." Sarah paused to control her emotion. "That's when I started asking questions. I talked to former employees, researched in the files I found while cleaning. I discovered that my father had been accused of theft, but I never knew the details." Ethan watched her in silence, realizing that there was more to come. 2 weeks ago, I received an anonymous call. A woman said she had information about my father's death and that I should look for a letter he wrote before he died." Sarah looked directly at Ethan. "She also said that you had that letter. I didn't know of its existence until today." "I know, because the same person called Anthony yesterday and said the same thing, that you had proof of my father's innocence and were hiding it to manipulate me." Ethan felt his blood run cold. "Someone is orchestrating all of this." "Yes, and I think I know who it is." Sarah pulled out more papers from the folder. "Anthony brought this to me this morning. It arrived at his hotel last night." Ethan examined the documents. They were bank statements showing a transfer of $50,000 to Anthony's account in Portugal, dated 2 weeks ago. The sender was a shell company, but the real source of the money was clearly identified in a handwritten note. PA, Personal Resources. "Patricia Anderson," Ethan murmured. "She paid Anthony to come back to the US, paid him to offer me a new life in Portugal." Sarah shook her head. "And she probably made the anonymous call to me as well." Ethan stood up, running his hands through his hair. "She is trying to separate us in every possible way." "Ethan, There's one more thing. Sarah hesitated. About that night at the hospital when I called you by mistake, what about it? It wasn't a mistake. I mean, it wasn't completely. Sarah looked at Ethan, who had fallen asleep in the stroller. I had written down your private number a few weeks before when I saw you dictating to your assistant during a call. I saved it in my phone as emergency. Ethan turned to face her. Why? Because... Sarah struggled to find the right words. Because I had already noticed how you looked at me and at Gabriel. And because in my wildest fantasies, I imagined that if something happened to my son, you would be the only person with the resources and power to help. So you really planned... I planned to have your emergency number. I didn't plan for Gabriel to get sick. I didn't plan to fall in love with you. Sarah stood up as well. Ethan, I grew up in the outskirts. I learned from a young age that life doesn't give anything for free to people like me. If I want something, I have to have a plan. Ethan stared at her in silence for several seconds. And what was your plan with me? In the beginning, for you to notice my work and give me a chance to grow. In the company, maybe a promotion, a course, a chance to get out of cleaning. Sarah was brutally honest. I never imagined you would be interested in me romantically. And when did you realize I was interested? I was terrified, because I realized I was starting to truly like you, and that wasn't part of any plan. Sarah moved closer to him. Ethan, I could have lied to you today. I could have pretended it was all a coincidence, that I'm an innocent victim of circumstances. Why didn't you do that? Because you deserve the truth, and because if we're going to have any chance of a future together, it has to be based on complete honesty. Ethan looked at Gabriel sleeping peacefully, then back at Sarah, whose face showed a vulnerability he had never seen before. Sarah, can I ask you a question? Sure. If you could go back in time, would you do it differently? Sarah thought for a long moment. I would. I would have been honest with you from the start about who I was and what I wanted. But Ethan, I also need to ask you something. Go ahead. Can you love me knowing that I'm not the simple and naive woman you thought I was? Knowing that I am ambitious, strategic, and that I made questionable choices to protect my son? Ethan leaned in and gently touched Sarah's face. Sarah, do you think I built a company from scratch being naive about human nature? Do you think I don't recognize ambition when I see it? So why? Because your ambition is for your son's life, not for personal greed. Because your strategies were to survive and grow, not to destroy others. Ethan held her face in his hands. And because, despite all your plans, you truly fell in love with me, that can't be faked. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. And now, what do we do about Patricia? About Anthony? About your family who will always see me as a gold digger? Now we do what people who love each other do. Ethan kissed her gently. We face the problems together. Gabriel woke up at that moment, as if sensing the change in energy around him. When he saw Ethan and Sarah together, he clapped his hands and laughed, as if approving the adult's decision. I think he agrees, Sarah said, smiling through her tears. So it's decided. Ethan picked Gabriel up in his arms. Now let's resolve this situation with Patricia once and for all. What they didn't know was that, at that very moment, Patricia was being arrested by the federal police in her apartment in Oakwood, accused of embezzling company funds and manipulating corporate information. The investigation had begun when Anthony, feeling used and manipulated, had approached the authorities with the bank statements and recordings of the calls Patricia had made to him. The truth was finally coming to light, but Ethan and Sarah's fate still depended on one last decision: whether they could build a future based on true love, overcoming social differences and the wounds of the past.